Welcome to Inside Politics with Kevin Klein, beyond the headlines, beyond the spin. Straight facts, sharp analysis, and common sense conversation you won't hear anywhere else. Let's get started.
Welcome to another edition of Inside Politics. I am joined by three of my Winnipeg Sun columnist colleagues. We have Lawrence Pinsky, KC, a former human rights adjudicator as well. Royce Koop, who is a professor of political science at the University of Manitoba. And Geoff Currier, a former radio talk show host and columnist with the Winnipeg Sun. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me. We're a few days away from Remembrance Day, and I've gone back and looked at the Don Cherry tape. And the reason I've done that is because in Nova Scotia, I read quickly from the premier that the courts there were not allowing certain people to wear a poppy. And then right after that, I popped up a story from Saskatoon where a defense attorney was told she was not allowed to wear a poppy. I don't know where this comes from. I don't know why they think it's political, because we wouldn't have the court system we have today if it wasn't for the men and women who sacrificed their lives. So, Lawrence, I'm going to start with you. You're in that business. You're a lawyer. And I know you're not going to go after the judges and stuff, but I got to tell you, this is nonsense.
Kevin, this is nonsense. This is utter nonsense. With all due respect, in Manitoba, in our court over on York, there are displays remembering members of the bar who died in World War I and World War II. In Ontario, at Osgoode Hall, there are Canadian flags in courtrooms. At least there were last time I was there, admittedly a few years ago. The notion that this is somehow political really is, with the greatest of respect, as we like to say here, a bastardization of the very concept of what political means. And I really worry it's in an age of DEI and an age of really folks that really are missing the boat when it comes to what it means to be Canadian, what it means to make the ultimate sacrifice as those soldiers did. Mm-hmm. And as we remember on Remembrance Day, in a word, it's wrong. In another word, it's repulsive. I'm glad the Premier of Nova Scotia has said something, has come out against it. I hope the Premier of Saskatchewan does the same. I haven't seen that in Manitoba. We're lucky. Our court here, I would call it a common sense jurisdiction in Manitoba. I cannot imagine that any of the members of the bench that who I appeared before, who I know, would say or support anything like this. I don't think it's true for most of the members of the bench in Nova Scotia. I'd be shocked if it was, but it's simply wrong.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Lawrence. 100%. It is repulsive that this is happening. And this, again, comes back to that whole thing. These are liberal, for the most part, liberal appointed judges that are playing DEI. And the courts is absolutely the last place where this should be happening, Geoff.
Yeah, there's no way you can possibly justify something like this. And I mean, we're all kind of traditionalists here. And I'm not sure about your old family background, but I have one relative who fell at the Battle of the Somme, and I have another relative who was buried in Korea. And so there's a long-standing tradition of military service in the family. I had an uncle who was a flyer who received his wings from none other than Billy Bishop.
Oh, wow.
So, which was pretty cool. Anyway,
yeah.
And so there's a long-standing tradition of military service in the family, and the idea that these our notion of the poppy and our observance of Remembrance Day seem to go in waves here and there. We'll all remember the attack at the War Memorial at Parliament Hill some years ago when a young soldier was murdered there. The acknowledgement of Remembrance Day and the solemnity of that observance really spiked around that time, just after that, because of that incident. And so these things do come in waves. But when somebody on the bench makes a ruling like that, it's disturbing.
Well, I don't think it's a place for the judge to do that, right? They're there to interpret the law and pass down judgment. It's not their job to say who can and cannot wear a poppy, especially when they're dead wrong calling it political.
Yeah.
I'm going to disagree with you for one second. I'm sorry, Royce. They do control their courtroom. There's no question. That's what the law provides. A judge controls his or her courtroom. They do control, including how one is dressed. The fact isn't that they don't have jurisdiction. The fact that it's simply wrong. And I don't know if this, I gather from the reports, assuming they're true, that it was a judge. It might have been administrative. I don't know. Whatever it was, it's wrong. And I would have hoped the Chief Justice in any jurisdiction where this happened would have stepped in and said, wait a minute, this is a bridge too far. I'll just make one final comment. The idea that Don Cherry was prescient, that's kind of funny. He was right on, though, about this.
Yeah.
Right on about this.
Yeah, my one set of grandparents of mine, they were both veterans. And so I grew up in the Legion, the great roast beef dinners and everything. So this sort of thing makes my blood boil. And I think it does anytime these stories come up about veterans, about Poppies, a lot of Canadians rightly feel very angry about it. And the argument here is that it's this kind of overzealous interpretation, the need to be impartial. Judges should be impartial. They shouldn't do anything that makes them look partial. And of course, we don't want judges coming out with like 20 different like bumper stickers and buttons and advocacy things. But of course, the common sense response to this argument is everything that Lawrence said. The Poppy is different. The Poppy is special. The Poppy is a recognition of the service and the sacrifice of our forebears, and everyone can see that. And so we get these stories where things that were widely agreed upon get kind of dragged into politics, and we should always push back against it. There was another incident in Nova Scotia where there were Canadian Forces members were invited to a school, but the school administrator said, "Well, you don't wear your uniform. We don't want you to wear your uniform," and that, for whatever reason, and that attracted the ire of the premier. It wasn't that long ago in Ontario that a parent who was a police officer was coming to give a presentation at their kid's school. And they said the same thing. You can't wear your uniform, and really don't bring your police car to the school as well. And so we should always push back against these things. And some of us, we kind of look down on East Coast conservatives. We think they're kind of squishy centrists, but sometimes they can be real traditionalists. They can be fiery about some things. And Tim Houston is a good example of that. He's pushed back hard, and that's the appropriate response.
Royce,
Yeah, I've met Tim. I like him, but I really applaud what he did at this time, and the fact that they're asking military people not to come in uniform and police not to come in uniform. Don't try. I'm at my limit when it comes to the triggering. Because I know what we're going to hear from some people is that the Poppy triggers war, or gives them a feeling of war, even though they had nothing to do with it. I mean, there are countries in Europe where Flanders Field was, that respect Canadians, that honor Canadians year after year after year for the sacrifices. And in our own country, and I'm going to say it again because I mean it so passionately, these people that have a job simply because our soldiers died for them are disrespecting them.
I can't help but wonder, is this part of the erosion or corrosion of what it means to be Canadian? This lack of this embarrassment at being Canadian that we see perpetrated at certain universities, at many universities in Canada, and it's hugely problematic. We should be enforcing and honoring Canadian values, like honoring our veterans and those who made the ultimate sacrifice, not shying away from it, not saying it's wrong, not saying it's yes, but not in officialdom or at schools. That's atrocious behavior, and it spells, in my respectful view, the end of the Canadian experiment. And that saddens me a great deal, and I hope that Canadians won't allow it to happen.
It frightens me, and being in the media as long as I have been, despite my time in politics, I really think this would have been a great opportunity for Carney to stand up and squash this and talk about how important it is that Canadians take time on November 11th, that we honor those that died for us. I mean, Geoff, you've been in the media a long time as well. I mean, this was a golden opportunity for a prime minister to get out there and bring the country together to rally behind those that sacrificed for us.
Yeah. Symbols matter. And the Poppy is one of our most enduring symbols. I mean, our symbols have to be something beyond double doubles and donuts. And the poppy is one of those absolutely critical symbols of what it means to be a Canadian. And we could get into several hours of these conversations, but to Lawrence's point, there's a feeling out there in some quarters that we've all been sensing for some time, that there are a lot of people who live here who somehow think that Canada was a bad idea. That's the implication. Yeah. And it's the kind of thing that we could fill up entire libraries with the conversations about this, how it's come to this. But it is, I agree with Royce that the line has to be drawn, and the pushback has to happen.
And I agree with you. I think there are a lot of people that think Canada is bad, that our history is terrible, blah blah blah. Then why are you here? Like there's no fence, there's no wall around Canada. We have airports, we have roads, we have trains. You can get on a boat. You can leave Canada anytime you like.
Yeah. Remember what Churchill said? It's the Englishman's inalienable right to live wherever the hell he pleases. Well, it's true for us too.
I got to say, though, Kevin, that if Canada keeps going the way it is, I suspect we will see a wall on the 49th parallel, but it's going to be built from the south up.
That would be expensive. Kevin, you said Mark Carney had a chance to jump in and say something about this. I'm not sure that he would. I think that Carney is actually kind of more woke than we realize. He's just not as flamboyant about it as Justin Trudeau was. On the Poppy on a Remembrance Day is by far the most important kind of shared civic experience that we have as Canadians, and everyone should find a ceremony and go to that. And that includes permanent residents, people that are here on work permits, study permits, international permits. They should be sharing in this civic experience, and we shouldn't be embarrassed to kind of say that and encourage that as well.
Yeah, but be careful, because that's what Don Cherry basically said, and he was canceled, right? I call it the cancel culture club started tumbling for him in a heartbeat, and he even got fired from Sportsnet for that. But really, he was talking passionately about the fact that if you are new to Canada, it's more important for you to recognize what our soldiers sacrificed for, so that you had that ability to move here and have the life that you want, the life that you chose. You could come here and have that. And not wearing a poppy, I think, is again, it's disrespectful. And it bothers me that Carney, you're probably right about Carney. He may be far more woke than we think. But if you're going to be the prime minister of the country and you're going to start talking about how we have to spend more on defense, we have to do this for defense, we have to do that for defense, then the very first thing you should do is be building the morale of our soldiers, building the morale of our staff.
The problem is he doesn't believe it. He actually is doing it because Mr. Trump is forcing him. He doesn't believe it. My father was an immigrant to this country, and so I really respect immigrants for what they contribute. But he taught us to love this country, to respect it for what it enabled him to grow and build and do. When you see graduations over the past couple of years, no one is going out. The valedictorians weren't talking about how great Canada is. They were wearing Palestinian flags, not Canadian flags. They weren't celebrating Canada. They were celebrating really a Hamas assault out far away in the Middle East, having nothing to do with Canada. Isn't it time that universities start, teaching how amazing this country is or was or should be, instead of importing this woke nonsense, judging people not by the character of who they are, but by other outward symbols that are just, in my view, a corrosion of what Canada is.
Well, we talked about that before, right? We talked about the indoctrination at universities.
Yeah, it's so my other grandparents were also immigrants. They were conscientious objectors, and they were the biggest patriots, in part because the Canadian government kept their promise. They were the biggest patriots in the world, and so I think with the Cherry's comments, if you kind of expressing unhappiness, condemning people for not wearing the poppy, the approach that I take is that, like, if you're here, I teach lots of international students, and I would hate to see them kind of feel like these shared experiences are not for them to participate in. I want them to be there. I want, if you're in Canada, you should be there, experiencing this and kind of participating in this big collective project, which is a country. And there's far too many people that don't do that, including people, kind of people that were born here as well.
But the problem is it may trigger somebody. And that's our society, right? We don't want to trigger anybody anymore because they just come out and say, we'll start saying that's a trigger for me. And then all of a sudden we have to cancel everything that we've known for decades and decades.
I don't think, Kevin, it's about triggering. I think it's about an embarrassment, a shame about being Canadian. It's a failure of teaching what Canada and Canadian values are. I think that's what this is about.
Yeah, but Lawrence, it's the government and others that are saying it's triggering, right? Colonialism, triggering this, triggering that, triggering. I was the chair of the Winnipeg Police Board, and I remember talking to people about having school officers, right? You have resource officers. Yeah. That was an important role. They became a part of those students' lives. They were somebody they could go talk to. They were somebody that they trusted. They were somebody that they felt safe around. And out of the blue, a few people start talking about how, well, it's a military state. That is not the case, but we let that ride. We didn't stand up and fight for that. We didn't stand up and fight for what was right there. It's the same with our DEI hiring policies. We never stood up. We never fought back. If we don't stand up and fight back against this Poppy thing, it's like Lawrence said, we're going to lose more and more of our Canadian identity.
Yeah, the school resource officer thing is a real scandal. The arguments in favor of getting rid of them are just baloney. The data was baloney. I wish those SROs would be back in schools tomorrow. I hope that gets corrected.
Yeah, I'll tell you, if I was back in politics, I'd be fighting to have SROs back in school.
Yeah,
they do a lot more than people can imagine. A lot more. Anyways, good discussion on the Poppy, gentlemen. Thank you very much. I'm sure that you will all be wearing your Poppy if you're not already, and you will be attending one of the services across Manitoba, Winnipeg, or even some of the ones that are televised, if that's what you have to do. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks for watching Inside Politics with Kevin Klein. Please like and subscribe to this channel and visit thewinnipegsun.com for more.